Today, we are going to be looking at different regions in Canada, their economy, and just a little bit about them. So, first, just kind of overall economic development in Canada. Canada is the biggest trading partner in the US, and their economy is mainly focused on manufacturing, on service industry, in mining, and in agriculture. Those are the biggest industries in Canada overall for their economy. So we have farming, agriculture, and they have a number of different things that they farm: wheat, beef cattle, grain livestock, dairying livestock, potatoes, fruits, tobacco, vegetables, and we have kind of a map and a key of the different kinds of things they do down here. This picture shows mining and oil manufacturing. Those things are all important parts of the Canadian economy. Okay, so first we'll look at the Atlantic provinces. So Atlantic provinces, we have a map over here. That includes Newfoundland and Labrador, Prince Edward Island, or PEI, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick. So those are the Atlantic provinces. Okay, so the Atlantic provinces are Canada's poorest region. Doesn't necessarily mean that everyone's poor, but economically speaking, that's the poorest region in Canada. They have very poor soil, is not very good for agriculture. That's not one of their major industries in the Atlantic provinces. They have long winters. You can see they're not the most northern parts of Canada, but they're pretty far north. So you'd expect long winters and not as good of soil for agriculture. A lot of their old growth forests are mostly gone. So it used to be a more forested area, but there have over time been a number of people cut those down, and so there's not as much of the old growth forests. Their fishing areas are overfished. That is a major issue that Canada has been working on, and Canada's by far not the only country that struggles with overfishing in their waters. So you can see they're right by the Atlantic Ocean, and so there's lots of fishing. We have fishing boat to symbolize. You can see this kind of shows you those long winters, and you can see what it's like, and you still have next to the sea. So there is a lot of fishing that goes on, but that does go with the issue of those areas. It's very easy to overfish as everybody's trying to get what they want from the ocean or other bodies of water. And they do have mineral deposits and they have oil. So this is an offshore that they mine and sell. So those would be fishing, mineral deposits, and oil would be kind of their main industries that they have in the Atlantic provinces in Canada. There is an overall relatively small population in the Atlantic provinces. It's not a huge territory of land, and you have long, harsh winters. And if you think about how many people do you need to go on different fishing boats, how many people can even fit on an oil rig, you're not going to see your large populations in Canada in the Atlantic provinces. Okay, so Quebec and Ontario. Quebec and Ontario is this region of Canada. It is the major industrial center of Canada. They do have a number of major cities that you have probably heard of: Montreal, Quebec City, Toronto, and many others. They also have a number of mineral deposits in this area, so mining those mineral deposits are a big part of this area. The service industry is a big part of the economy in Quebec and Ontario. You're going to see that more with your major cities. And they're also very important transportation centers for Canada. So you can see Quebec and Ontario here. So this is a stretch of mineral deposits. You can see definitely goes through most of the Quebec and Ontario provinces and then kind of goes up into other regions of Canada. This map down here shows a little bit more of your transportation route. So you can see you have from your Atlantic provinces, there are some bodies of water, and you have Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, and Windsor. So you can kind of see like that's like city to city. There's lots of transportation. You're getting close to the Great Lakes, which is part of why Canada and the US are always have been pretty strong trading partners and continue to be very strong trading partners today. The Quebec and Ontario do border the US, and they also, you notice, Quebec has access to the Atlantic Ocean. So, just in terms of transportation and trade, you're going to see a lot of that happening from their major cities in this region of Canada. Prairie provinces. So, in the prairie provinces, you go again further west in Canada. You have Saskatchewan, Alberta, Manitoba as your different provinces in this region, the prairie provinces. Wheat is one of their major agricultural crops that they grow in the prairie provinces and very large scale farms. You can kind of see this aerial view of agriculture. You can see that that's large scale, right? And wheat often grows well in a lot of prairie provinces and prairie states and regions around the world. So that's not a huge surprise. They also have mineral deposits. They have some fossil fuels, including oil, in these different provinces in this region, the prairie provinces. So that is also something that is part of their industries. We have a little tiny oil ray contraption that is just kind of in the middle of a field, which would be pretty relatively common in this region in Canada. And then the scenery draws a lot of tourists. You can see it's just very beautiful. You have lakes, you have some grasslands, you have forests, you have mountains. It's just very beautiful, and prairies in and of themselves are very beautiful to look at. So that is also an important industry in the prairie provinces is tourists. Okay, so British Columbia is going further west, still kind of going along the US-Canadian border here. You have province of British Columbia, which is kind of on its own as far as the economics goes, a little bit different than the prairie provinces. They have pretty fertile land, so there's still, some farming. There's also your big industries. You have salmon fishing. This is an area where there is a lot of salmon, so that's a pretty major industry. Again, now they're by the Pacific Ocean, and so fishing is going to be part of what they do. Forestry, you have good fertile land. They do still have forests, so logging and forestry is part of it, and that is something that Canada does regulate and monitor, and trying to make sure that they are cutting down trees that are okay to cut down and then still preserving forests for the future. And then mining. There are coal in this region. So this is a coal mine in addition to other kinds of mines for important resources. But one of the big things they're mining in British Columbia is coal. They also trade a lot with Asian countries. The products from British Columbia, there's a lot of trade, not just to the US, but also various Asian countries, like a ton. I'm not going to list them all. But there's a lot of trade there. Think about it. They are on the Pacific Ocean, so that's pretty easy to ship things over to Asia comparatively. So we have planes, we have ships, and all of that. The Canadian North. So for the Canadian North, we are going just kind of straight north. We have different provinces. This is an area where a lot of your economy is on metal and mineral deposits. I have a picture of oil and gas, fossil fuel deposits along the Arctic Circle. So this is a map that's looking at the Arctic Circle, and over here you can see Alaska and you can see Canada, how they have a number of oil and gas deposits up here, as well as you can see some of Russia's and some of Sweden's and some of Greenland's. So you can really see your northern oil and gas deposits. Right now we're just focusing on Canada, but you can see them in just like the more northern area. So that's fossil fuels. You also have just metal and mineral deposits that are intermixed in here. And this is the traditional home of the Inuit. So this is an area that Canada worked to make sure that the Inuit, their native peoples, had a place to continue their traditions and their way of life. So there are also some traditional economy aspects that go on in the Canadian North, and Nunavut and the Canadian North. So you have just kind of an overall scenery, what it might look like in the Canadian North. So you have mountains, you have this village, a city next to the water, and you have a couple pictures of Inuit people. Urban environments. So Toronto is Canada's largest city. I have a picture of Toronto up here, and Toronto is right by the US-Canadian border and by your Great Lakes. So all of that together is probably historically why Toronto is so large, right by the Great Lakes, traditionally good for trade and for different resources of fresh water and all of that. And so you can see Toronto is Canada's largest city. Montreal, this is a picture of Montreal skyline, is Canada's second largest city. Other very important large cities include Vancouver. This is a picture of Vancouver. Vancouver is on the other side of Canada and from where Toronto and Montreal are. Montreal is also on the US-Canadian border. You have Calgary. This is a picture of the Calgary skyline. Also have Edmonton, skyline, and Winnipeg, which is also on kind of the middle area here of Canada, and it's also by the US-Canadian border. Your most furthest north city that we listed here as major cities would be Edmonton, which is up here. You have Calgary, Winnipeg, you have Montreal, Toronto, and of course, you can't forget about the capital city of Canada, Ottawa, right? So there are some big major modern cities in Canada. A lot of your big cities are further south, close to the US-Canadian border, which makes sense. We've looked at the fact that most people in Canada live along the border between the US and Canada. About their political structure, we'll look more on this other days, but they do have a parliamentary government, parliamentary representative democracy. So that is an elected government body. So their government structure looks a little bit more like the United Kingdom's than it does like the US, because the United Kingdom also has a parliamentary democracy. And they also have the provincial governments. So they do have some aspects of federalism where you have your federal government and also your regional, state, or in this case, province government. So their provincial government, they can set taxes, they can set policies. So there's a number of different things that the provincial government does, as well as, of course, their municipal or city governments. The head of state is still connected to the United Kingdom. That's probably why their government structure looks much more like the United Kingdom's than the US does. Not that the US is, we've talked about a lot of similarities between different democracies already, and we'll continue to talk about them. So you're still technically under the Queen of England. Your federal government, you have Senate and House of Commons, you have your Governor General, your Prime Minister, cabinet, ministries, and territories as far as, who's in charge of what level of different things. Your provincial government, you have your lieutenant governor and the legislative assembly. You have cabinet ministries and municipalities and all of that. So there's a lot of similarities, and there are some differences between the political structure of Canada and the political structure of the US. They both embrace this idea of federalism, where some things happen at the national level, the federal level, and some things happen at the provincial or state level, depending on if you're talking about Canada or the US, because provinces for Canada are equivalent to what states are for the US.